All this is in stark contrast to the lives of the workers. Even children as young as 5 work in terrible conditions. Not only poorly paid, workers also face the daily risk of accidents, none more so than in the ironworks.
Actually making raw tie is one of the hardest things in the Industrial Revolution. There's nothing harder. Anybody who saw it said it was the cruelest work that they ever saw. This stuff, raw tie, was made in basically 100-weight lumps by teams of men. It's not mass steel production. It was all handwork, all by skill of the operator and the team, handed down from father to son.
The working life of a puddler who stirs the molten iron is usually over by the age of 40.
You work really hard, you get incredibly sweaty, you lose a lot of body fluid, and then, of course, you stop and your body chills out. So, you know, they've got a lot of rheumatic problems. Also, the people looking at the furnace were staring into effectively a white heat. You can tell the temperature of the iron just by looking at it. If you spend a lifetime looking at it, you very quickly go blind.
With all these hardships, people feel powerless and trapped. These feelings will culminate in one of the bloodiest incidents in Britain's industrial history. When wages are cut and workers laid off in May 1831, the workforce erupts in anger. The ironmasters can only look on as a crowd of 10,000 seizes Merthyr by force. Using armed blockades, they fight off regiments of troops for a whole week. Inspired by a potent symbol of revolution, the workers take a rag and soak it in cow's blood.
It is during this uprising that a red flag is raised by British workers for the very first time. It becomes a symbol of solidarity. This uprising isn't some spot of local bother. It is organised, it is connected, and after years of unrest, the working class of Wales have an appetite for revolution.
When the authorities regain control, 20 are dead. One protester, known as Dick Penderyn, is hanged for allegedly wounding a soldier. He's long remembered as a working-class martyr and hero. The Industrial Revolution is sharply dividing Welsh society, the rich and the poor. And the rebellious mood this inspires isn't just confined to the new iron towns. Rebellion is also brewing in rural Wales.
On the night of the 13th of May, 1839, a group of men descends on this small village in Carmarthenshire. It's called Efail Wen. They're armed with axes and sledgehammers and big sticks, and they destroy the new toll gate that's just been installed. Then they move on to the toll house and burn it down.
The attack at Efail Wen is just the beginning of an underground movement of protest that sweeps across West Wales. Poverty-stricken farmers are angry that new private companies, the turnpike trusts, are charging too much to use the roads. There'll be more than 200 attacks on toll gates over the next 5 years.
Just imagine the lot of the tenant farmer here in West Wales in the early 19th century, paying shockingly high rents to the landowners, paying a tax to the Church of England, a church he doesn't even attend as a chapel goer, paying more taxes to build workhouses, which are prisons for the poor, and then on top of all of that, to get his produce from A to B, he needs to pay a toll to use the roads. Those toll gates are run by some pretty greedy and unprincipled people. Is it any surprise that the tenant farmer resorts to violence?
For the second attack, the farmers adopt what seems to be a bizarre tactic. They dress up in skirts and in aprons and even in bonnets. And then they blacken their faces. After this, they descend on the now rebuilt toll house at Efaelwen and chant a woman's name, Rebecca. They demolish the toll gate and disappear into the night. Their distinctive guerrilla-style attacks will come to be known as the Rebecca riots. The costumes the farmers use are a symbol based on local folklore.
There's one ritual which tells us a lot about local tradition in this part of Wales. It's a humiliation, a form of punishment for wrongdoers. For example, men who beat their wives. They're tied to a wooden chair. Sometimes it's a wooden horse, and then they're paraded in front of the community. And the men dispensing this justice, for reasons we don't quite understand, have blackened faces and they wear women's clothes.
By dressing up, the rioters attacking the toll gates evoke a sense of local justice, and it becomes a potent symbol in Welsh history. But who is Rebecca, and where does she come from?
It could be that one of the leading protesters has a close relative or friend called Rebecca. That's always possible, but I think there's a more likely explanation. And the clue is here, in the Bible. We are talking about people who know their Bible inside out. There is a passage in the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, and it says this: "And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, Thou art our sister. Be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gates of those which hate them." So could this Rebekah be the one who inspires the rioters?
May Rebecca's descendants conquer the property of their enemies. It is the sentiment of an oppressed peasantry. Over the months, a hidden wave of support grows through the parishes of West Wales. There are several Rebeccas, riot leaders whose identity is unknown. For 3 years, they elude the military and the London police. As the riots spread, it's believed that even some of the local gentry support the cause. They target other symbols of oppression, workhouses where the poor and infirm are badly treated. On the 19th of June 1843, the protests reach a bold climax.
And this is the scene of the biggest disturbance of that time. It involves 2,000 people. It takes place in broad daylight, and they converge on this place. This is the Penlan workhouse in Carmarthen. It is full of the most unfortunate members of society. The protest, which is all about genuine grievances, is hijacked by some rather unsavoury characters. And suddenly, it all turns rather nasty.
It is the violence of this protest and the clash with the authorities that brings the plight of the tenant farmers to the attention of the London press. This is the turning point for the Rebecca riots.
By the autumn of 1843, there are police and soldiers roaming the countryside, and at last, the government acknowledges that the rioters have legitimate concerns. A commission is set up to look into these turnpike trusts, and guess what? They uncover malpractice and corruption. So those trusts are reformed, and the roads are improved.
Ultimately, the Rebecca riots are a victory. The authorities struggle to track down the riot leaders. The few that are caught face hanging or transportation to the other side of the world.
So what does Rebecca represent? The terror that stalks this countryside is unavoidable. When you have profound injustice and no lawful means of tackling it, you get an explosion of people power. And for me, the Rebecca riots are all about self-respect. Welsh people refusing to tolerate blatant abuse and demanding their share of justice and fair play.
That search for fair play and the people's quest for power are gathering momentum across Britain. Industrialisation has created a working class. People are becoming politicised. And in the 1830s, that means a fight for the right to vote. This struggle for democracy reaches a violent climax in the industrial heartlands of Wales at Newport. On the evening of Sunday, the 3rd of November, 1839, a cabinet maker from Pontypool writes a letter.
Dear parents.
His name is George Shell, and he's 19 years old.
I shall, this night, be engaged in a struggle for freedom. And should it please God to spare my life, I will see you soon.
George doesn't know the significant part he's about to play in the story of Wales.
The following morning, George Shell is one of 5,000 people walking down this hill into Newport. They have a common cause. They want the right to vote. They want better lives. And they're part of a much bigger movement, a movement that's going to transform the battle for democratic rights in this country.
George is part of a revolutionary struggle called Chartism. There is huge discontent across Britain that only those with property have the right to vote. The Chartists want to change this, and they have the support of thousands of Welsh industrial workers. But the authorities want to ban the Chartist meetings and to stamp out their cause.
The Chartist leaders here in South Wales feel aggrieved. They petition Parliament, it's the right thing to do, and yet Parliament delivers a snub. But the campaign for the right to vote and for a measure of power over their own lives is unstoppable. So the Chartists are driven to the last resort, the use of force.
Which is why the Chartists on the march are armed. Their intent is to take over Newport and overthrow the authorities who've set up headquarters at the Westgate Hotel.
Months of planning and endless hard work lead up to this moment. Secret identities, secret meetings, secret funding, weapons made and kept at home, other weapons stolen and hidden in caves in the surrounding area.
It's thought that across Britain, other groups of Chartists wait with bated breath. Victory in Newport might trigger uprisings around the whole country.
All of which drives the employers, the captains of industry, the leaders of society into a blind panic. One mine owner hides in his own pit. Landowners flee with their families. One clergyman even hides in a pond. And all because the Chartists are coming.
Originally, 20,000 Chartists set off from nearby industrial towns on the overnight march to Newport. But things go wrong.
Troops are moved into the Westgate Hotel. That is unexpected, and it's one of the things that undermines the Chartist plans. The weather is terrible. It's soaking wet, and lots of the marchers are late arriving. And by the time they come to this place in the heart of Newport, only a quarter of the original marchers are left, and they're exhausted.
On reaching the hotel, they face 30 soldiers supported by special constables who are armed and ready for trouble.
Most accounts seem to suggest that the Chartists fire the first shot. but we don't know whether it's accidental or deliberate. What we do know is that the round of shooting that follows lasts 25 minutes. It's a short, bloody battle, at the end of which the soldiers manage to defend the Westgate Hotel, and the Chartists throw down their weapons and flee.
20 lie dead, and even more are wounded, all of them Chartists. Some of the bodies are laid out in the hotel stables to await burial. Among them is George Shell, the youngest victim.
I shall, this night, be engaged in a struggle for freedom. And should it please God to spare my life, I will see you soon. But if not, grieve not for me. I shall fall in a noble cause.
George Shell is now remembered as a Chartist hero. When troops examine the bodies, they discover an enormous array of weapons and the full extent of the Chartist planning. Newspaper reports marvel at the level of organisation of these ordinary working people. Some of the Chartists from that uprising are buried at St. Woolas Cathedral on the route of their final march.
George Shell is one of 10 Chartists whose bodies are brought here to this churchyard in the dead of night by the military and placed in unmarked graves. The authorities clearly want this campaign to be forgotten. But these are people prepared to die in a noble cause. Not only do they want democratic rights, they want a basic measure of happiness and dignity in their troubled lives. And the Newport Rising is all about that irresistible need for change.
The 3 leaders of the rising are charged with high treason and transported to Australia for life. The Newport Rising is a popular protest by the working class of Wales, the beginning of a political awakening that will dominate the next 100 years in the story of Wales.
It takes one turbulent century to change the face of Wales. A predominantly rural economy becomes an overwhelmingly industrial one, and it brings with it a new class of person, a spirited working class whose poverty and suffering will create a new politics. Our story of Wales is now about rapid change. The Industrial Revolution, the social turmoil, they're only just beginning.